upright mic so we get a lot of. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to The Real Deal. What gets you hired after service? We're pleased that you're here with us watching our recorded session so you can hear real talk on getting hired from three different perspectives: hiring executive, talent acquisition executive, and a veteran who just made the transition. So today's event is both for the job seeker and the mentor. And we want to equip both with the very latest on what's working and what's not in finding a rewarding career after service. I'm your moderator, John Popelka, and I'm thrilled to co-sponsor this event along with the National Veterans Leadership Foundation and the Overwatch Partnership. So today's format is going to be a panel discussion, and we'll do some introductions, cover a few basic logistics, and we're going to dive right in on our hot topics. So this event is made possible by three organizations: My Coaching Practice from Ashes, the National Veterans Leadership Foundation, and the Overwatch Partnership. Let me tell you a little bit about each of those. So the National Veterans Leadership Foundation, or the NVLF, partners with colleges and universities to enhance the higher education experience for military-connected students. Dedicated to improving their transition, NVLF equips students to excel by strengthening veteran support offices, fostering leadership opportunities, and creating campus-to-career resources. Through innovative programs and comprehensive support, NVLF advances academic success, career readiness, and a strong sense of belonging for our military-connected students. Our second organization is the Overwatch Partnership, and that's a veteran mentoring nonprofit in Central Ohio, founded by three veterans in 2016. OWP provides mentors to transitioning veterans as they navigate the often difficult journey, navigating from active duty to civilian life and work. Since their founding, OWP has supported over 190 veterans with mentorship and support. Approximately 40% of those mentees are student veterans going to college after serving our country. The OWP mission is to enhance the veteran career transition to civilian life and work through mentorship, career coaching, camaraderie, and support. And finally, My Coaching Practice from Ashes provides coaching to help people break past limits, make bold choices, and lead with renewed purpose. We'll have links available in the session notes, and I want to introduce our panel. So joining us today, we have Ashlyn. Ashlyn is the Senior Manager of Talent Acquisition at Worthington Enterprises, where she spent over a decade leading strategic recruiting initiatives. She's launched the company's first workforce experience for high school seniors, built the internship and DoD Skill Bridge programs for Worthington, and has been instrumental in veteran hiring efforts. A Wright State graduate, Ashlyn serves on the Columbus State Advisory Council and lives in Dublin, Ohio. Chris is a Vice President of Project Management and Strategy at JPMorgan Chase, where he recently joined after a year-long career transition. A former infantry officer in the Ohio Army National Guard, he served in both full-time and traditional roles, including a deployment to Syria as a company commander. A graduate of The Ohio State University, Chris volunteers as the military outreach lead for Central Ohio chapter of the Project Management Institute, helping veterans launch careers in project management. He lives in Newark, Ohio with his wife, Morgan, and her dog, Dimitri. And last but certainly not least is Phil, who is the Chief Financial Officer for Corporate Solutions and Group Benefits at Nationwide Financial, overseeing segments that generate over $10 billion in annual sales. A CPA and graduate of The Ohio State University as well, he is the founder of the Columbus State Business Community and also an active mentor with the Overwatch Partnership, supporting veterans transitioning to civilian careers. Phil lives in Worthington Hills, Ohio with his wife, Melissa, and their two sons. So for all our panelists, thank you all for being here. So we're going to start with a panel discussion, lots of questions to get to. And so let's get things popping here. So we're going to start with the hiring landscape. And on this question, I'm actually going to start with Chris and then maybe go to Ashlyn to get us started here. So Chris, again, thanks for being here. Thanks for your service. And one question that came in for us is, what's a common misconception veterans or career changers have about today's hiring process?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, John. And once again, happy to be here. And thanks everybody for joining. So I think one common misconception that I know that I had when I was starting my transition was that it's not just about the role that you're applying to. It's also important to take into account the hiring manager as well and their perspectives. So because not every your military experience is not going to translate for everybody the same, and so it's important to just have that expectation when you're applying to a given role and thinking about your chances is that maybe it's all about finding the right hiring manager as well as the right role.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense there. Thanks, Chris. Ashlyn, over to you. What would you like to add?
Sure. Yeah. Something that I think is worth sharing is a lot of times people feel that applying to jobs is doing enough. So if you think about going out to Indeed or LinkedIn, there's a quick apply feature that you can apply within seconds. And a lot of people are utilizing that. So you are applying to jobs that a lot of other people are applying to. And sometimes the talent pool gets flooded and it's hard for recruiters to get through all of the applicants. So I would encourage folks to follow up with companies directly, hiring managers directly. That way you aren't just one of the other applicants that are in the pool. So it is a great way to apply, obviously, but I always encourage the follow-up or applying directly on company websites as well.
Okay, so go right to the source in those applications.
Yeah.
That makes a ton of sense. Great. All right, so we got a little bit of a build here in audience. So I'm going to actually, before I get to my next question, do a couple things here. So first and foremost, if you're joining us just now, go ahead and do an intro in the chat. So just drop something in the chat if you haven't already, introducing yourself and what brought you here to today's event. And then the second thing we're going to do real quick before we get to our questions is Mike's going to pop a quick poll up in Zoom. So Mike, if you can pop that for us, because we want to kind of see a little bit out there. So you should see that career transition attendee question, what describes your role? And so if you get a hot second, I'll let that build and we will keep that up for a moment. And while people are responding to that, I'm going to go to my second question here. Ashlyn, I'll keep you on the hot seat for a minute and maybe go over to Phil. So what are the trends, Ashlyn, that veterans or job seekers should be paying attention to right now?
Yeah, so we have been seeing a lot on skill-based hiring. So it feels like there's kind of a shift in the market where employers aren't as concerned with degrees as they once were, which I think is a great thing. It helps people have more access to different roles. So I would say as you're thinking through applying, think through the skills that you have, not necessarily degree or like the educational experience. The other thing is, and I'm sure we will talk about it a lot today, is AI. So it is out there, it's in the workplace. Don't be afraid of it. But if your positions that you're applying to now aren't already mentioning AI, they likely will in the near future. So I would just say it's important to be on board with AI and start exploring that as you think about your next career move.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense there. And I'll share too, before I go to Phil. So we have most of our attendees are mentors. So mentors first, thanks for doing what you're doing. About 79% of you out there are mentors. And so that skill-based hiring, I know we're going to come back to that. But I would imagine supporting the transitioning service member, thinking about a skills-based approach in their application process and how they represent themselves. Am I thinking about that the right way, Ashlyn? Yeah, great. Phil, how about you? Trends that veterans or job seekers should be paying attention to right now?
Yeah, well, John, before I dive into that, just want to say thanks for having me and thanks to all the service men and women on the line and the mentors that are doing that. I have no military background, and so I just want to express to you, thanks for the sacrifices you've made for our country. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to give back in a small way. So Ashlyn, I think, hit the nail on the head. I think AI, but I'd say even more broadly, technology is becoming just really important in all aspects of all kinds of roles. And so, if you're thinking about the types of skills that you want to augment your military experience with, I think technology is a really good place to focus on.
And anything you're seeing like inside that technology space, Phil, I'm sure it's very, situation and company and role context specific, but any attributes you're seeing as good places to lean into if people are not sure where to start?
Yeah, like data analysis, I'd say, right? Like, can you take a bunch of data and then draw insights from it? And so I think there's different types of skills that allow you to do that. Now, I'm in finance, and so certainly that's important to me. But I think more broadly, that's the kind of thing that I think will help candidates stand out in a lot of different, on a variety of roles.
Yep, got it. Makes sense. And then actually, Chris, I'm going to pitch over to you too. In your job search journey, what were some of the trends that you paid attention to, and what are some things you heard about that maybe you didn't swing at and chose to focus elsewhere?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question, John. So I definitely focused in on the tech side of things a lot, and just because I didn't have a lot of experience in tech, obviously as an infantry officer, we bang rocks together and make things out of bubble gum and duct tape. But I really went into and kind of went down a few rabbit holes as far as APIs and learning how different tech systems connect with each other and things like that. One thing that I actually didn't go down far into that I might have gone farther into was like using AI in my job search, particularly like in my resume. I just mostly wrote that up myself and I did use some AI tools for, analyzing how it would relate to different job postings and stuff like that. But I didn't actually use it to like help craft my resume.
Got it. So we have a section, and we'll just strike while the iron's hot here on AI. So let's talk about that a little bit. Ashland, I'm hearing a lot about AI in the applicant screening process. What do applicants need to know? How do we think about this?
Yeah, so I think it's hard sometimes to spot when AI is in the mix, whether it's, doing the resume reviews or that kind of thing. I would say if you are applying on a company website and they have a chat bot enabled, or if the website's able to do resume parsing, so taking your resume and dropping it into the application, I would say to be a little bit more alert and just be mindful of that. So if they're able to do resume parsing, there's likely some kind of filtering system that's in place. I will say if you can, I would recommend carving out a section in your resume that has skills specifically listed out. And I would make sure that you are reviewing the job description and updating your resume to match. Make sure that what you're saying experience wise you do truly have, but make sure you're pulling in the keywords that the company is utilizing as well. So a lot of people are using AI, but I do still think that there's a good majority of recruiters that are truly still going out and reviewing most all of the resumes as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. And an old adage is match your resume to the job description to make it easy on the human to make a hiring decision. But I hear you're saying is do it also to make it easy for the algorithm to say, yes, this person is clearly a fit.
Yeah, you got it.
Chris, I'll put you back in the hot seat here. Did you use AI in any other ways at all in preparing for or navigating your job search? And if so, why or why not?
Yeah, so I think the reason why I didn't was I was also very mindful in that there are a lot of AI tools out there that will detect AI generated work, right? And so I didn't want that to be the recruiter or the hiring manager's, view of my work, right? So I would use AI tools to analyze my resume, but not to generate my resume or my cover letter or whatever, what had you. I wanted to make sure that that was all original work because I was imagining them using those AI detecting tools on the back end.
Yeah, and I would imagine it sounds like to me it's important that it was your resume with representing you in a very human and authentic way and not risking losing your brand, if you will, by having AI write it for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially in the field that I wanted to go into, project management, that human to human, person to person interaction is a very important part of that. Right. And so I wanted to make sure that, fact that I was competent in interpersonal skills, and just being a genuine human came through in my presentation to them, which was my resume and my cover letter.
Yeah. Phil, in your experience in hiring people, hiring teams, mentoring others, I'm curious on your take on this. What role, if any, should AI play in navigating career transition, looking for work?
Yeah, one of the things that I would encourage, and I'm still learning how to use the tools myself, but I found it really interesting to just chat with on things that you don't know a lot about. And you can quickly, I think more quickly, do research in that way with the tools. And so, as a candidate, one thing that might be interesting to try is if you're trying to do research on a company and think about the kinds of things that you might want to learn about a company, you might be able to get good summary information from an AI tool on it to help you think about what questions you might want to ask the interviewer or insights you might want to draw to help inform your responses to certain questions as you're having conversations with that company.
Yeah, so even doing that interview prep sounds like you can really use those tools to go deep with the company. And I would imagine, since you're probably a very data-driven individual, kind of do a trust but verify with whatever AI says on, hey, is that really accurate? And going to the source, I would imagine.
Yeah, that's right. I don't think you want to like take for granted anything, but I think a lot of the AI tools, at least some of the ones I use, have the source stuff at the bottom. So you can then, if there's something that you want to leverage, you might want to validate it before you bring it up.
Okay. Ashlyn, what about using AI to either to practice interviews and those kinds of things? Any thoughts there?
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to give my secrets away here, but I have maybe once or twice dropped job descriptions into ChatGPT to see what types of questions we should be asking in an interview. So if you guys are preparing to interview, I would recommend doing that because there is potential that your employers may be utilizing questions from that. I think utilize it. If it's out there, you should take advantage of it. You can also put your job description in there and ask what questions you should be asking, or compare your resume to the job posting to get a good idea of what you may be missing that you could prepare for. If people have questions on, hey, you don't have this experience, help me understand why you think you're a fit. AI can potentially pull that out for you easily. So I say utilize it if you can.
Yeah, that makes sense. Awesome. Thanks so much. So I heard kind of a word I knew we are going to come to, hot topic for sure, the resume. There's so much conflicting advice about the resume and lots of different ways of doing it. So I'm actually start with Phil on this one. When you get resumes, like what are the things that you're looking for? What pops for you? What's not helpful? Just tell us what goes through your mind when you kind of look through a pile of final candidate resumes.
Yeah, happy to. It's interesting because you've got to meet two needs when you're designing your resume a little bit. We've talked about how you got to get through the filters and through the talent acquisition folks that are going to be looking through the resume and trying to like kick out a bunch, right? So you've got to get through that filter. And then once you do, the hiring manager is going to look at it and they're going to have a different lens. And I'll tell you that the lens that I look at is I want to focus on accomplishments, not responsibilities. And the distinction is when you like list what role you had, I want to hear what you did in that role. And if again, John, you pegged me really quickly, data driven, right? Like, oh, well, if I save 10% of cost out of my department, from this role, like I love those stats. Or, we completed this 5 new projects over 2 years, whatever, like those stats that help you talk about what you achieved in the role. That's different than I'm responsible for cost containment for my area. I'm responsible for launching new products. We want to hear what you did. So focus on those achievements, I'd say.
That makes a ton of sense. And Chris, how did you do that where you had a lot of military accomplishments and you had to translate those into, I would imagine, outcomes that work for the civilian workplace?
Yeah, I think it's numbers, obviously, right? So you have to use solid numbers like in your bullets under each position. And it is sometimes a little bit tougher to put it in a different kind of more civilian parlance, I guess you would say. But really, percentage increases I used a lot, right? So, I use, I took responsibility for this program, increasing, the throughput of, partner trained forces by X%. It's like things like that, that kind of at least would help make it more understandable for somebody who doesn't have that military experience.
Yeah, so I would
John,
imagine.
sorry,
Go
John, I
ahead,
was going to
please.
jump in because I think Chris made a really important point, which is that you have to understand a lot of people that read your resume will not understand that jargon. I'd be one of those people. And so I would highly encourage anybody to have somebody that has no military background read your resume and highlight for you the things that might, you take for granted, but somebody else might say, I have no idea what this is. This doesn't mean anything to me. And they might be able to help.
I don't know why it's not on there. Yeah.
How to reframe that in a way that'll land with a civilian.
Yeah, makes a ton of sense. A jargon check, a clarity check, always a good idea. And Chris, when you talk about that, I mean, it just comes to mind for anyone has been in the military, like those NCOER, OER, like past tense, action verbs, led, developed, implemented, those things. I would imagine that is a bit of a natural transition of describing what you accomplished.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially, like it was always driven into us that if, you're writing an OER and NCOER and you want to give somebody an exceeded expectations, rating, you had to provide like substantive data-driven facts to support that. And that's exactly what I tried to do with my resume. So I just made sure that I had, numbers supporting all of my achievements and trying to really quantify exactly how I was successful.
One more question for you, Chris. I'm going to ask for Ashlyn's hot take next on resumes. What advice would you give to mentors who are working with military personnel and veterans to help them make that translation? How is a mentor effective in that space?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I think if I'm understanding what you're trying to get at here, I'm going to say, the advice that you gave me when you were helping me through the transition is it's almost like have a bank of just like all the achievements that you ever did in your career, and then you can kind of custom build your resume by just copying and pasting those specific achievement bullets that apply to that given job description that you're applying for. So that way, you have this ready-made bank, and all of a sudden building a resume becomes very easy because you can just drag and drop for whatever applies to that position.
Makes total sense. Quick service announcement here because I'm not seeing the chat. Mike, my friend, is monitoring the chat. So while we're talking, if you haven't done so already, begin dropping your questions for the panel. We're going to switch over to a Q&A section here shortly. So if you have questions for the panel, drop those into the chat and we'll put those in our question bank for anything we haven't covered yet. So Ashlyn, on resumes, you have cross-functional, hybrid, chronological. Should they be, have QR codes on them, clickable links? Like, is there any common ground that's like, yep, this is always a good idea, or no, don't do that when it comes to resumes?
Yeah, a few things come to mind. The first one I get a lot of pushback on. That is trying to keep your resume at one page. I know that is difficult at times, especially when you've got a lot of experience. I say 2 pages max, because after that, it's hard for the recruiters to, read through it quickly. Love Chris's idea on the bank. So make sure that the bullets that you're including on your resume are relevant to the jobs that you're applying for. We love metrics. That's one thing we always say is make sure you have metrics, because we do want to know what you've done, what you've accomplished. I'd say over the last couple of years, I've started to see more photos on resumes. I recommend not putting a photo on there just because it allows for unconscious bias. Whether people know it or not, your photo may trigger something in their mind. So I say keep photos off. The acronyms are a big thing. Try to stay away from those. I was talking with somebody last week reviewing their resume, and they had an accomplishment on there, and it was all the letters of whatever they had won. And I'm like, what in the world does this mean? So make sure that what you're sharing is going to make sense to somebody who maybe isn't in the same role as you, or have those same affiliations or connections. And then stay away from boxes. So make sure your formatting is just words and bullets, essentially. Boxes do trick systems a lot. So just making sure it stays clean for the upload. But yeah, try to, as best you can, make it make sense for the civilian population. I know you guys have talked about the mentors. I think the mentors can help do that. There's also employers, like, we're happy to help look at resumes and ask questions if we don't understand something, just so you all have, more success when it comes to the application process.
In resumes, thank you for all that. Are there any, sometimes I hear about lots of job switching or other, I guess, tells. There's kind of some, rumors about that. Are there any red flags or green flags or things like that applicants should keep in mind?
Yeah, I would say, job hops, that is a red flag. Just kind of shows that the tenure isn't there. And I know a lot of employers do want people to stick around for quite some time. I think the average tenure is like 3 to 5 years in the workplace. So that is a red flag. If there's missing years of jobs, that's a red flag as well. If you do have a gap for whatever reason, I have seen people put notes in there as to why there is an employment gap. So that helps at least alleviate the question of, what were they doing during this time? I'd say those are probably the major red flags, is the job hopping and gaps in service.
Makes sense. Phil, how about you? Anything that just pops that I know you talked about outcomes, clearly is very important, having measurable outcomes. Anything else that either would you characterize as a green flag or a red flag on a resume, generally speaking?
Yeah, my two, I think Ashland's was a great list. The only one I'd add is I do like to see kind of outside of work things, right? Like, give us a little sense of your personality or what you're passionate about from a community service standpoint, something like that. I would say that's an important element to include.
That makes sense. Okay. All right, I'm going to switch gears a little bit. So talk a little bit about networking. That gets so much attention. Chris, how important was networking in your job search, and why or why not? And I'm kind of curious I'll ask that question to Phil and Ashland as well.
Yeah, thanks, John. So networking was probably the most important thing that I did during my military transition, right? It really was kind of the thing that when I started doing it, it was like a night and day difference from, getting responses and engagement from the applications that I was putting in. And also, getting feedback on my resume and the practices that I was doing in my job search in general, right? And just kind of giving me the information and the feedback that I needed for myself to be successful.
Right. Thanks, Chris. And what secret sauce, one follow-up for you, like, what's the attribute or the thing that you think enabled success in networking for you?
Yeah, good question. I think really the secret sauce is just being eager to meet people, like, and it's not necessarily just about like the job search itself. It's just, wanting to, meet new people and learn a little bit more about them, and not making it, this transactional thing that I hear people concerned about networking a lot. Is just, really focusing on getting to know that person for the sake of getting to know that person and not expecting anything in return.
No, thanks for that. That's really, really sound advice. Phil, same question with a little twist here. So, networking, how important is it? But the add-on I'd like to bring in too is, like, when I'm assuming people want to network with you, like, what works, what gets your attention, what doesn't seem to work. So anything you can add there would be great.
Yeah. Well, if there's one thing that you leave this conversation with, I would say, please don't underestimate the power of, I'm going to not even use the word networking, knowing someone at the company that you're trying to get a job at. So just think about it. Like, you get a cold resume that you have no context of who this person is, versus someone at the company sends the hiring manager a note and says, hey, I met Chris the other day at something. He seemed like a great guy. You should take a look at his resume. I guarantee you Chris gets a much, much closer look than the other 10 resumes that did not have that personal touch. And so the point is that, and you don't know who in your network will someday be able to do that for you. And so the point is, the more tentacles you have out across different people, and again, I love Chris's point. It's like, I'm not trying to, there's not a quid pro quo right now. I don't know, like, I'm not trying to get something out of this. I'm just trying to meet people. And the more people I meet, good things are going to happen because I know people. The only reason I'm on this call is because Eric and I are neighbors, and we got to know each other, and we're friends. And he says, hey, I'm doing this cool Overwatch partnership thing. I think it'd be great if you were a mentor. And now I'm involved. That's networking. That's just having a relationship, and that relationship leading to something else. And so I'll get off my soapbox, but super important, because I think that's really gonna pay dividends in the end. And then, John, to your point on like what stands out, it's exactly what Chris said. Like, it's just wanting to get to know somebody and being curious about what they do. The other element I'd say is having a sense of purpose and passion. Like, I can sense when somebody's like, hey, I'm really interested in something, and I'd love to talk to you about that thing because you seem like you might be interested in that too. That's a really good angle to approach, I'll say, like a cold networking conversation with through LinkedIn.
You feel like you got something that you're co-creating with that networker because there's a common interest, and that sounds like that really is a good catalyst to get things off on the right foot. Ashlyn, I know you have a lot to add here, so go ahead. Networking, tell us your secrets. Tell us everything you know.
Yeah, sure. I will say I got my first job, or my job here, out of luck. So it wasn't connections, but I will say in my time here, I have submitted a lot of candidates based on networking. So I always recommend, if you're at an event or if you're a part of organizations, follow up with people within 2-3 days. Find that common connection or interest and approach them based on that. I'd say the thing with networking is you're not going to get an immediate return on that. It's really about learning from other people and having the visibility. So it may be you meet somebody who knows somebody at a company and it goes that way, or you may meet a hiring manager directly, but it's going to take some time to nurture that relationship, build that relationship to a point where somebody would want to refer you or recommend you to a job. I will say I get a lot of LinkedIn connections. A lot of them are just, hey, thanks for connecting. And I don't have much to respond with that. But if somebody reaches out to me and says, hey, it was great seeing you, on the panel last week, a couple follow-up questions to that, that is engaging, and I'm happy to respond to those kinds of things. So I would always just recommend, do a quick intro, find that commonality, and really hone in on that.
All right, team. So you heard her. She should get like 50 emails with, hey, you did a great job on the panel, and thanks for doing that. That's a great layup. And I would imagine that's true for you, Phil, and Chris as well. Mike, let's check in on chat. I got lots of questions that came in pre-submitted, but let's go to chat and see, Mike, if you had anything in the chat that someone had that we didn't address already.
Sure, we've got several in there, but I'm going to go a little out of order because this is one that I hear a lot about, but it's talking about a military connected disability. Should an individual mention that? And if so, how? And I would make that a broader term for a disability, whether it's military connected or not. Is that something that should come up in the process? And if so, when and how?
Ashlyn, that sounds like that's teed up for you.
Yeah, that's kind of a tough one. So I would say depending on the job, if they're applying to a position and there's no concern if they can do the job, then I would say there's no need to mention that because it shouldn't matter. When it comes into the conversation is if there needs to be like a reasonable accommodation, that kind of thing, you may want to bring it up sooner than later just so that the employer would know if they could accommodate you in that role. And if not, they don't want to waste your time, obviously. So I would say if you're applying to jobs and the requirements you're able to do on your own, I don't think you need to disclose that. You can if you want to, but I would say only if you're seeking an accommodation would be when to let them know.
Right. Thanks, Ashton. Mike, what else we got in there?
I'm going to combine a couple questions here, but we were asked about some advice for in-person versus online interviews, the differences. And then someone asked also, can we expect to have multiple interviews through the process? And so I don't know if some of those might be online and some in person, or if certain companies just do one type or the other. And then what advice would you have for those different types?
I'd love to get perspective from all panelists on this. Phil, just as a hiring manager, hiring lots of teams, let's get you the first crack on those questions.
Yeah, so I would expect multiple interviews. Typically, there's a series. You might meet with the talent acquisition person first, and then you might meet with a hiring manager and a couple other people, and then you might meet with the hiring manager's boss, right? That might be a typical kind of sequence for interviews. And the nature of those interviews and the questions will be a little different across those categories. In terms of in-person versus virtual, again, I think because virtual is available, a lot of times the first or the second might be virtual, and then the last one they might bring you into the office. And so I think the key for virtual is, all the things you might expect, distraction free, no clutter or anything in the background. You could use a clean background, a virtual background, if that's helpful. But I think you just want to make it as seamless as you can. And the other thing I'd say is it's harder to get energy and body language virtual. And so I'd say like up your game virtually in terms of like how you come across, because it's just harder to feel and get a sense. If you're competing against someone that isn't virtual, it's easier to build that connection in person. And so you're going to have to kind of overcome that in a virtual environment in any way you can.
Makes a lot of sense. How about you, Ashlyn?
Yeah, I don't know that I have too much to add to that. I would echo everything. I would probably plan for 3 rounds of interviews. The first round being either talent acquisition or a recruiter reaching out to you. We typically do a hiring manager one-on-one. Depending on where people are located or the level of the role, we'll either do that virtual or bring them on site. And then we do a final with higher up leadership and some team members. So I would say plan on probably 3 touch points as well. And then same with virtual versus in person. Make sure you're in a quiet place, no distractions, make sure your camera's working, make sure your mic's working. There's nothing worse than starting an interview 10 minutes late because your internet's gone down or something's not working the way that it should be. So prep before, give somebody a call a friend through Teams or through Zoom, call your cell phone to laptop, just to make sure everything's working. But same response, I'd say.
Great. And Chris, a 2-part question on this thread. So, what are the top, 1 or 2 things that people really should be thinking about in interview prep? And part 2 of that question is what role, if any, does the mentor have in helping? So for all the mentors on the call, what are things they can do to help that candidate be successful in interview prep?
Yeah, absolutely. So one quick thing just to add on to the question for Phil and Ashlyn, what was really helpful for me, I think, was keeping in mind where the camera was, right? So when we think about, eye contact in a, person-to-person setting, right, we're looking at the person, right? But now on a virtual call, I'm looking at the camera, now I'm looking at you, right? But I'm not actually looking at you. So when you're answering the questions, don't look at the person, look at the camera. Right. But 2 things that I kept in mind for my preparation was Number one, prepare, but don't over prepare, right? Because I think a lot of people will prepare and like write out their responses and then memorize their responses. And then like they sound canned, right? They sound rehearsed and it's not a genuine experience for the interviewer. Another thing that really helped me out was, really do as much research. And again, this is where networking comes into play again, right? Try and get some inside scoop about exactly what they're looking for out of their candidates from your networking contacts, ideally, if you have them. And then try and craft your responses or keep those points in mind for your responses when you're answering those interview questions.
Great. And anything our mentors should keep in mind in their role, if any, in this process, Chris?
Yeah, I think really, from a mentor's perspective for interview prep, it's interview prep is a lot easier when there are two people, So like I think, practice interviews are huge, right? Just being a sounding board for, hey, I think this is a good response, but like I'm not 100% sure on it. Could you give me your feedback? And so just being that sounding board and that second party is really helpful.
Phil, when you're conducting an interview, what are some of the things that you're looking or listening for? Assuming the candidate, is knowledgeable about the subject, what are things you're looking for and listening for in that interview with you?
Yeah, I'm listening for all the things that I can't teach. Because a lot of things, this gets to another question of like, well, what if I don't have the requisite experience for whatever I'm applying for? And honestly, like there's not, we work in insurance. There's not a lot of people that have done insurance before. Like when you study stuff in school, you don't study insurance, you study manufacturing, right? It's the thing that everybody knows. And I don't think we're unique. Like every company, you're not going to come knowing how to do whatever it is. And so the things that stand out in an interview that I'm looking for are the things that you can't teach, which is like high initiative, a passion for the work that they're doing, the accountability to follow through on things, right? And by the way, these are all things that all the people on this call and servicemen and women have in spades. And so like these are the things that I think you want to have show up in an interview. The other thing I'd say is I was reflecting, John, on your question on what mentors can do. There's two elements that I would highlight that the mentors and the interviewees themselves think about as they go into them. One is I would think less about what are the questions I'm going to get and how do I respond to them, and think instead about what impression do I want to leave the interviewer with, regardless of what questions they ask me. And then how is that going to shape the way that I go about answering those questions, right? Because if you have that strategy in mind, it doesn't really matter what they ask you, because you're going to take the conversation to the place that is going to make you look the best, right? And so that let's just reframing, I think, is huge. And a mentor could ask their mentee, what impression do you want to leave? And now think about that lens with how you prep. The second thing I'd say is, don't forget that you are also interviewing them. You are doing an assessment on, Chris, your point, the hiring manager. You're doing an assessment on the company. And so I'm impressed when interviewees kind of put me on the spot with the questions that they ask, because they're asking insightful questions about, do I really want to work here? What are the things that are important to me about working here? So the way that you show up in that regard can also tell you something about the person you're dealing with.
And demonstrating some of the behaviors that you might be looking for, like doing, like you said, your homework ahead of time and researching the company and researching you as a leader and probably all the things, I would imagine.
Yep, exactly.
Ashlyn, I've heard in some cases interview strategies like using a STAR technique. So I would respond to the question with situation, tasks, actions, results. There might be some other kind of templates of how I should answer a question. Overrated, underrated? Like, what's your hot take on the craft of responding to interview questions in an interview?
Yes. I'll say at Worthington, we do train on the STAR-based interviewing. So we love when we get real examples from people, because a lot of times candidates can interview very well and you walk away thinking they're a great person. You know, they could be a great company fit, but you don't really have true examples of what they've done in their previous roles. So we do talk about, you know, give us the full story. We want to know the situation. We want to know what you did in the situation, and we want to know what came of it. So we do train to really ask the follow-up or the deep dive questions, just so that we can get a true sense of your capabilities to be able to do the job. So we do it, we prefer it. We have found many great candidates utilizing the STAR method. We've also hired some not great candidates and have realized it's because we didn't have any real examples of the work that they'd done or the experiences that they'd had. So we are all about tell us the story.
Yeah, and I've heard a number of companies are using that. So for everyone, you know, online or watching this as a video, I would say Google STAR interview format and get used to that because you could possibly expect that coming your way. Now, that's great advice, Ashlyn. And I think the other thing I heard, I'm curious your take on this too, is part of it's managing the clock. So if I answer your question very efficiently, it allows you as the interviewer to get to the next question or ask a follow-up. And if I'm very long-winded and don't get to the point, it chews up some of the interview clock. Have you seen that? Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think there's a happy medium. Like I said, we want to know, you know, what you've experienced. We want to know the story, but we probably don't need every single detail. So if you're including things that aren't relevant to what you did or how you performed, we probably don't need that extra info. But I will say, give us a little bit of light. I mean, it helps to get to know you personally, and then it again helps us understand your abilities. So short and concise, I think, is great, but add some flavor to it if you can.
Little flavor. Don't take all the seasoning out.
Yep, you got it.
Mike, how are we doing on questions? Do we have anything else in the bank?
Yeah, we have 2 left right now. One of them is a common complaint that the folks are hearing from veterans, particularly student veterans, is that when they apply for a job, it's already been closed out. So wanting to know, how often do companies update their sites or sites like Indeed, Glassdoor, and is there any way to know that job has already been closed out before they apply?
So we'd love to start with Ashlyn, and Phil, get your hot take on that as well. So Ashlyn, what do you think?
Yeah, I know for us, we typically have the postings pulled once a candidate is hired. So we may be in the process of interviewing and still collecting candidates or applications. So this is maybe good feedback for us. They do stay out there until the job is filled. So I don't know that there's a great way to be able to tell that unless you're doing that direct outreach to companies. And again, if you're doing that, they may allow for additional candidates to be considered. So I probably don't have the best response for this one other than apply if it's posted, do the follow-up. When you do the follow-up, they should let you know where they're at in the process. That way you can either, you know, continue to have your hopes up or at least be set straight on where they're at.
No, that makes sense. And Phil, I might be reaching just a little bit, but I'm connecting this to something you said earlier about networking and really getting a little bit on the inside track in an authentic way. Are these things connected? And any other thoughts you have on the question here?
Yeah, they might be connected. And I'm out of the loop and ignorant on Nationwide's approach to that and whether that would occur. So can't add anything more than what Ashlyn said. But I think, John, you're right. Like, if you have a network connection, that's much less likely to happen. And by the way, if you have a network connection, like, you might be able to squeeze in on a process that had already been further along when you otherwise might not be able to.
Yep. And I would even imagine with a good network, it would be great to be in a position where you get the call and saying, we'd love for you to apply for this position, and you get pulled in, as opposed to maybe pushing and applying, and you kind of have to go through that front end process. So you can even flip the script and maybe hopefully create some demand for yourself in a very authentic and real way. Mike, what else we have out there?
Just got one in that said, how frequently should you expect to take a personality test or other those types of recruiting screening steps before an interview? Is that common?
is not common for us. I don't know if any others, you guys are seeing that.
Yeah, we typically don't have anything until like an executive level where you would have something like that.
There you go. We're sneaking up on time. I have a little bit of a hot potato here. Ashton, I'll start with you. Salary negotiations, or the idea of salary. Let's start with, where in the process does that come up? Should the candidate initiate that conversation? Like, what are some tips on just figuring out how to get through that salary question?
Yeah. So I will say it feels like a lot more companies are posting pay ranges out there. I know on Indeed, you have to have something out there when you post your jobs. So hopefully that helps bridge that gap a little bit. We have the conversation during the first call. So if you've got a recruiter or talent acquisition on the line, you should be talking about comp at that time, in my opinion. Typically, the recruiter will ask what range you're looking for. That way they can tell you if you're a potential fit for the role based on that range, but it also helps them understand what level that you should be coming in at. If that person does not ask you what your expectations are, I would ask them, and they should have a range, and they'll likely tell you that it's going to depend on your skills and ability and how well you fit for the job. But they should be able to tell you we're looking between X and Y. So I would have that conversation early on to save everybody's time.
No, thanks for that. And Phil, just in your experience as a mentor, as someone who's navigated, a long tenure of careers for yourself, anything to add there on how people think about salary?
Echo everything Ashlyn said. I would just add, don't undercut yourself in the way that you talk about it. So, you could say, for example, hey, in my current career, this is about the range I'm at, and I'd be looking for at least that much. That could be a way to talk about, I'm giving a minimum, I'm not giving a max, right? And then the other thing I think too, sometimes people get stuck into is like those conversations, the way they go, it'll almost be like, and Ashlyn wouldn't do this, but sometimes you'll try to like pin the person in on what they're thinking, and then that just becomes the offer. Don't allow that to happen, right? You need to get an offer from them. And so you want to make sure you're in the range, you want to make sure you're targeting the right spot, but then they need to make you an offer that you react to. Don't get in a position where you're like basically saying, here's what I'm willing to come work for you for.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Chris, how about you? Any tools, tips on how you think about that now you've gone through your transition experience?
Yeah, so I kind of use the same phrase whenever, a recruiter asks me what my, ideal salary would be, or what my range would be, or something like that. And, that was, I'm thinking about like compensation in a more like holistic fashion, taking into the benefits and taking into account like the benefits and culture of the organization. So, what is the role kind of and some of the other things going on with the position, so that way I get that number as well as some more information about the culture and benefits that I'd be looking to join.
The total comp, everything,
Right.
Benefits, retirement, paid time off, you're looking at the whole picture, it sounds like.
Right.
Okay, right.
It's a really
So we're moving.
Point. Sorry, could I double click on that, John?
Please double click away. Yeah.
It's a really important point, because the mistake I see people make sometimes is they get myopic on the comp, like, and so I'd say not only like what does all the role have to offer, but also think about the opportunity. So if you're comparing two roles, don't just look at the comp, think about what does that role lead to as a next step, right? Like, don't focus so much on this thing right in front of you. Try to think a little bit further along. I'd add that onto Chris's, like whole comp. The experiences and opportunities that role affords you is also kind of a compensation, because it can lead to something better in the long run.
I love that. Team, we're going to do a couple things here. So I think Mike's going to pop a poll question to Zoom. And then I'm going to go back to our panelists for any final thoughts. And then team in the chat. So go ahead and answer on the session feedback, please. And then also task number 2, team, is in the chat. Share with us in the chat your number 1 takeaway. Like, what was the thing that was most helpful that you heard today? And what is something that you didn't hear that you'd like to hear about if we're able to do something like this again? So answer the poll question. Mike's popped up here in Zoom. And then in the chat, 2 questions, your most important takeaway, and something you'd like to hear in a future session. While our audience is doing this, final thoughts, words of wisdom. Chris, let's start with you.
Yeah, I think my words of wisdom would just be, hang in there. It's a marathon, not a sprint, right? And if this is going to take time, right? You're coming into an arena where I know for me, like I didn't have any experience, in a professional career search, coming out of the military, and it's going to take time to, learn how to adjust to that. And just make sure you set the expectation with yourself that there is going to be rejection. There's going to be a lot of it, and that's okay, right? And you just got to, keep moving forward and keep learning from each experience that you go through.
I love that. Thanks, Chris. How about you, Phil?
Well, one area we didn't get to that I'd love to share some thoughts on are like, how do you translate experience? And so what if you get a question like, have you ever managed a production line before? Maybe you're applying for a role where you have to manage a production line. And so that's the way the interviewer asks the question, or any variation of that. And whatever it is, you haven't done that before. You don't have that credential. You don't have that requisite experience. I think a great way to attack that problem is to say, well, no, I've not done that. But you know what I think would make somebody really successful in managing a production line? I think it'd be like, what do they do when the thing breaks and things go wrong? And how do they inspire the people that work on the production line? And let me tell you about the experiences that I have that would make me really effective at those competencies, right? Because I can motivate people. I'm calm under pressure, and here's examples of that. And then add on to that, and I can learn quickly. So you're going to teach me stuff. Let me give you examples of how I had to learn something new. I'd never flown a helicopter before, and they threw me in there, and I had to figure out how to do that. And if I can learn how to fly a helicopter, then I can figure out how to fix something on a production line. So again, take control of the interview and bring to it the experiences that are going to translate.
Oh, I love that. Thanks for adding that. Ashlyn, how about you?
Sure. I would say just take advantage of the resources that you all have. Make sure you're working with your mentors. If you find yourself in a place where you've got questions, reach out to different folks. I'm always happy to answer any questions that you all may have. Utilize AI. Let it help you get to know it. That way, as you go into these positions, you've got some experience with it. But I would just say, take advantage of the resources that you've got.
Thank you so much. For our panelists, thank you all so much for giving your time today. For our awesome audience members, thanks for being here. And share about your experience. I know NVLF will get this video posted, so we'd love for people to have access to this. This closes us out for today. Special shout out to NVLF, National Veterans Leadership Foundation, and the Overwatch Partnership for making this happen. Everyone have an amazing rest of your Thursday. That's going to close us out today. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you, guys.